This is Black Market Leadership, the underground resource for disruptors and status quo breakers.
The one thing that really, two things that stuck out. One is the Germans are not impressive. During this, everyone notes how unimpressive the Germans are as a small security force. The most impressive to me were the Japanese. Oh my Lord, you read this and like the Japanese stick out as these guys were they were first in, first out, or first in, last out. They're always at the point of an emergency. And I remember that, oh God, the one colonel, the guy's a rock star. His soldiers had been on duty for 3 weeks straight, and he asked permission. May we have a day off? And everyone's like, of course you can. But the Japanese, man, they really come off this to me as one of the most impressive of the group. But that's just from what other people were saying about them.
Yeah, no, the Brits and the Americans speak high of the Japanese in this confrontation. Of course, the Japanese are also looking, they see Japan, or they see China as this is fertile ground for them. And they are really wanting to exert control here. But I think you also knowing what's going to be happening within the next 50 years, less than that, actually, within the next 30 years, and the conflicts between Japan and China, and then World War II. You see Japan as a rising power in all this, and they're showing it with their military prowess and the Boxer Rebellion.
And you mentioned the Russo-Japanese War. That's 1905. That's going to be the first time in history that an Asian power defeats a Western power, Russia, in military terms. So keep that in context for the audience here, because right now, even though the Westerns are overwhelmed by
anyway.
Modern, yes. So the dynamics are just fascinating. But what's so interesting is how people come together. You really reduce their options. Either you survive or you don't. So it's so funny. You give them that one reference point, survival, and everyone comes together. And yet, again, it's the Chinese who you're on their turf. You have these foreigners on their land, and you have the Boxers and with the Chinese army, and they're not unified. And so much so that the author Preston makes the point that, or at least she quotes some of these participants, that they're really shocked. This was a battle, or this was a siege that was for the Chinese to take. If the Chinese had coordinated and attacked at one time, they would have wiped out the Westerners. They never did it. Never. And to me, it's very interesting how uncoordinated, how I guess the level of disunity did not enable the Chinese to unify and have a decisive battle.
Well, like you're saying, the whole notion of survival really gives the delegations, the Westerners, and I include Japan in here with the Westerners, a sense of purpose, a sense of mission, a sense of focus.
Yeah.
And you see on the Western side, a delegation of authority. People break down. People know, you look at those 55 days under siege, people in the legations knew what their job was. Now, they're flexible enough to change because, again, they got that common sense of mission, survival. So they're going to stay flexible, but they know what their job is. Are they doing laundry? Are they redistributing food? Are they building sandbags? Are they trying to shoot? They know what their job is. Compare that to the Chinese. They don't have, while their center of focus is to expel the foreigners and all Western influence. That's about it. The Empress Dowager really has kind of another agenda, her power. Yeah. A lot of governors have different agendas as well. A lot of the generals will have different agendas, and they can't even quite unify there. Some of these generals, while they're Chinese generals, or while they say yes, they will, yes, ma'am, we'll do what you say, really don't want to see the foreigners thrown out, and they're not a fan of the Empress Dowager. Whereas some are, diehard, dedicated, they're on board with her. So you'll see, orders not necessarily being followed, some more strictly than others. Some generals are fighting a little harder than others.
Yeah.
They have a little bit of kind of underlying, chaos, if you will, on their side. And they're not as unified as they might appear on the surface.
I mean, you're totally right. Disunity. That's the first level of chaos. And it really is. I mean, if you were to ask them, if you went back and asked them, is this a world war? I mean, you're surrounding Westerners who, a diplomatic quarters is technically what? The ground, the soil of a nation.
Yeah.
So, one question is, are we at a world war? And if you're in an army, you can't answer that. You can guess you're going to have disunity. Like you said, there is no shared purpose, no shared mission. And but the Westerners and the Japanese, they have a mission, survival. And boy, you said it. Everyone had a job. Everyone they can improvise if they needed to, but everyone worked together, even though they didn't like one another. And the irony is, even on the second expedition to rescue the delegations in Peking, even the order of march, if I remember right, the Russians and the British are separated because they don't like one another. They even put that in their plans, but they still supported one another. So it's so funny to me. The lesson is that shared mission, real clarity. Why are you here? What are you doing? And frankly, if you were to ask a Chinese general, are you at war with these Westerners? I don't know what they would say. Some would say yes, some would say no. Of course not. We don't want a war.
Didn't want to be. Well, and even the Westerns' disunity, their different agendas, actually adds a competitive edge to their accomplishments, because primarily they're really, you look at the British who want to show themselves as being the old guard. We're here, we're the big guys. Germany's up and coming, Japan is up and coming, Russia's an old guard, but they're trying to exert, hey, this is our territory. So you have these competing agendas that make them more competitive, but it's all directed towards, again, a common mission of asserting control of the territory and rescuing the delegations. So even their split agenda works in their favor, because they're able to focus that energy towards the common goal of rescuing the legations.
Even it's so funny because I call this the control factor. It's control is as an element of leadership. A leader, you got to be able to control your team. I know people like saying that, but it's truth. But there's also the fact that you have people in your team who want also to control. And if you don't demonstrate that a good enough level of control, that you will have people who will literally try to drive strategy from the ground up. And one of the greatest examples, I laughed my ass off, was when that second expedition goes to Peking, the Allies, if I remember right, the French and the British, like, we don't have, the French and the Germans say, we don't have the materials we need. They went back to Tientsin, and it's only the Russians, Japanese, Brits, and Americans. They're the ones who had a full force that goes to Peking. And then a battle plan. Remember how they're going to attack the walls? Was the western side of the walls and the top of the Russians. And everyone has their own specific lane. And the day of the battle, the Russians, like, they see an opportunity. They totally throw out their plan. They jump in front of the British to take the nearest opportunity because they want to get there first. And I'm laughing. It's chaos, but it's constructive because they're like, okay, they're exploiting an opportunity. But man, they just threw that plane out the damn window because let's get, it conforms to what they want to do.
But the common mission benefited that, because the Russians, everybody, nobody wants the other side to look like they were the dominant force. When the Russians jump the gun on the assault, the Brits are like, we better get in there too. You see that with the forts at the mouth of the Peiho River. The Japanese are very aggressive about punching in there, enough so that motivates the Brits. Hey, we better get our guys in there. And they're just like a half step behind the Japanese in taking the forts.
Man, when those forts are taken, it really is a sign. I mean, this is where, again, Japanese plus Western powers are conquering. They're on the offense, conquering Chinese military forts, which is literally an act of war. I mean, so the military, they're doing it, and they're like, yes, we're successful. And the diplomats are like, oh my God. If you're back in Germany and Britain, like, Jesus, we're about to go to war with China now. That's not what, we're already fighting in South Africa and we're not winning. Now we're about to engage this whole. So anyway, to me, this Boxer Rebellion is such a great example of chaos because there's so many things happening. There's so many things. I guess this disorder is just escalating. The military is successful. The diplomats like, oh my God, this is going to be crazy. The people being besieged are getting this false hope. And my God, they're relieved, I think, August 14th. And if I remember right, they had planned that their logistics was going to run out, or all their food was going to run out like August 10th, I think. So they beat death by a couple of days.
They managed to stretch it out. And now they're getting low on food, of course. It is harsh for them. But some of the soldiers, the Allied soldiers that worked their way up from basically up from Tientsin up to Peking, comment on how good the Westerners looked inside the legations. I mean, they had clean clothes. When they were fed dinner, their opinion changed. But they're like, "What? These people needed rescued?" Because everything looks very orderly inside the foreign legations quarter. Now then they realized these people were eating terrible food.
Mule. Oh yeah, all the mule. Oh, those poor
horses
mules.
And mules. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But it's so funny. You're right. They look good because they were kept busy. I don't know what movie is it, but as people are under harsh, some of the harshest circumstances, and the leader forces them, compels them to do, you would think, menial tasks. He's keeping people's mind, keeping their minds busy instead of going crazy, being productive, doing something to move the mission along. It may not seem important, but it's keeping people mentally acute, get focused. So they look good, but when you start talking to them, man, they're just worn out. 55 days of potential death hanging over their shoulders.
Yeah, no, it's a very tense situation for them being stuck in there. Like I said, they're not getting much sleep. They're dealing with some illnesses. They're dealing with wounds. They're dealing with infections. They're dealing with a lack of food and not knowing. And it's one thing if we're going to be rescued on this day, but when you don't know when you're going to be rescued, that adds to the stress. When you don't know when relief is coming, that really will intensify, ratchet up any kind of stress that you're in at that time.
I don't know about you, but I think the luckiest guy in this story was the damn crazy Swede who had mental problems, who literally ran over to the Chinese and said, "Hey, you're shooting too high, shoot lower so you can kill us." And he comes back. I can't believe they didn't execute him right there. They threw him in jail. And I think he escaped again. And the Chinese were like, "God, this guy's crazy. We don't."
Because he's crazy, they think he's like in league with the gods or something like that with their heathen gods. So they don't want to touch him and mess with him. But am I wrong? Doesn't he eventually get killed? I think the Chinese.
I think he dies.
Yeah.
But he's not executed. A lot of people wanted to execute him, rightfully so. He literally, with the Chinese said, "You're shooting too high. Shoot lower so you can hit us." and then he goes back. And the Marines were like, I can't believe they didn't kill him, execute him. I would execute him right there. At least that's my instinct. But,
no, I understand. I probably would have too. Like this is a liability.
Oh yeah. I got to tell you. So actually, let's go back. The second expedition, they rescue. They go in. They rescue. Obviously, the diplomat families, the Chinese converts. And Dowager, the Empress, and her people, they leave town. Mm-hmm. And what unfolds next, it's so interesting because there's a comic in here about barbarity. And it's funny, it wasn't Mark Twain who said it, but I remember years ago when I was a VMI, we had what historian was it? It was a famous World War II historian. He came in and he made his point about the Allies, but the Americans in World War II. He's like, if you're in World War II and you saw German soldiers or Russian soldiers running to your village, you'd be in fear because there'd be rape, pillage, it's going to be some bad murder. But if you saw Americans, you wouldn't think that, like, oh, we're being rescued. It's so funny because when the Chinese leave and these Western nations, they take over Peking, the pillaging, all the souvenirs that are taken. I found it. I was kind of laughing because it's the kind of history I don't think people don't know. You think sometimes I guess people's inner I don't know what their inner impulses, sometimes emotional impulses take over, and there was some ravaging of the city, I should say.
But everybody wants a souvenir. You know, well, no, seriously, the boxers were doing their own share of looting.
Oh yeah.
And then when the city is liberated, and keep in mind, the liberation of the delegation is after 3 big battles, kind of descending in intensity, because the Allies have to take Tientsin, because there's also a diplomatic quarter at Tientsin that was taken. Allies are able to defeat the Imperial and Boxer forces there. And that's when the House of Cards kind of starts to fall apart for the Empress Dowager, because resistance seems to get a little less and a little less as people are sensing a loss of momentum. And Chinese generals are starting to move slower, resist orders. And meanwhile, the Allied forces are getting more confident. So by the time they get to Peking, they really are feeling very dominant. They've got a lot of momentum. The Empress Dowager and Imperial forces, or a lot of her security anyway, has left the city. A lot of the Chinese have also left the city, those who could. A lot of them who had sided with the Boxers, sided with the Empress Dowager, had left. Again, the Boxers had also been pillaging. So it's not like the Allies go in there and know, oh, this is so-and-so's personal property.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you really get, in fact, people at the time commented that this is really unbecoming of Western forces. Everybody's trying to snag old artistic antiques, relics, souvenirs. Even to the point that some of the stuff is being officially auctioned off by the British government. It's kind of another form of chaos right there of what's going on in the city. And some too, that's why American commands have always tried to discourage looting. I know other generals have too, because it does break down discipline. It does break down organization, and this will often bring out the worst in people. And
that's what. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, you get some pretty well, like in a lot of military actions, you do have cases of atrocities that are committed, not sanctioned by the command or by orders, but just done on individual levels as people kind of give in to the temptation to take, the whole, might is right kind of notion. I've conquered this, I can take it,
I tell you, reading this, when you read it, when I was reading it, I mentioned how impressive the Japanese were. Everyone except the French and Germans. I mean, literally everyone except those two. But when I was reading, I'm like, wow, this is really impressive. Even the Russians, I'm very impressed with them. But then you read it, and the Japanese and the Russians are raping and killing, and it's like, oh, and reading this is like, man, this is just ugly business.
It is.
There's nothing sexy about it. It's really ugly, man. When a nation goes to war, you really are almost unleashing a Pandora's box, because when the soldiers come in, I mean, the Chinese did it, the Boxers did it, and then the Europeans who are supposed to be hold themselves higher standard, they were doing it too. It was like, man, this is just it was very demotivating to read that, because I was so excited reading this of all the heroism, all things are happening, but boy, at that one time, just depressing.
That's kind of the opposite side of the coin. You find that a lot of battles. Warfare is common organized chaos in and of itself, because once you're on a battlefield, anything goes.
Yeah.
There are no rules, and it is a fight for survival. It's a fight the whole goal is to kill your enemy.
Totally.
So, people get worked up, I think you'd say, to put it mildly. And so, the idea of military discipline is to try to channel that in a constructive way. But you are going to have individuals that will break from that. I brought up with the Japanese and the Russians. They have a completely different view of what an occupying army is supposed to do and what rights and privileges they have as a conqueror over a defeated people. It makes looting look pretty mild in comparison.
So
that's why a lot of the civilians are willing to leave that stuff behind. Let that be looted. Let's get myself out of here, wife and kids out of here.
So for the audience, Peking is taken. The Empress and her people, they escaped 700 miles away. And what's interesting is the Westerners invite her back in. They don't imprison her. They don't put bounties on her. They invite her back in to take control or to be in charge. But literally, you can tell this is a total wrong term. She's not a puppet, but she's been defeated, and now she's there at their mercy. She exists.
She offers some stability because, again, the British don't need another country to occupy. America doesn't want another country to occupy. Now, Japan and Russia and Germany have a little different perspective on this. But they don't want, like I said, the Americans and the Brits do not want another country they have to occupy. The French are more concerned with the Southeast. That's really where a lot of the money, the stronger economy is at, as opposed to trying to control the Northwest or the northern part of China. So, yeah, they're happy to bring her back in, settle things down so they can extract themselves out of there. And, of course, you know what the Ming Dynasty there only has, and Manchu Dynasty only has, the Manchurians only have about another 10 years left before the emperor is overthrown and they become a republic for a short time before the communists take over.
There's a movie that came out in the 80s. I think it's called The Last Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw it, but I looked it up. It's an emperor child. And when Dowager dies, the Empress Dowager dies, this child takes over, and he lasts, I think, like a couple of years. But I think it's a Steven Spielberg movie. Did you ever see it?
I have seen it. It's been a long time, but I have seen it. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was an interesting film.
I'm about to check it out now.
Yeah.
I got to tell you one thing about this book that I love the writing and even how it's organized, because the focus here is Peking. Obviously, that's where all the legations are at. But there's another I don't know what you call it. There's a Christian compound. Is it Peking?
Well, there's the under Bishop Favier or Favier.
Petang.
Petang.
Yeah, or Petang. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
It's a compound. It's a church, but it's a compound. If I remember right, 1,400 yards, and in terms of 1,400 yards of length of walls around it. That place is also under siege. And what's so fascinating is that story, she even calls it a miracle. It's a miracle it even survived, because it was just totally by itself, and it survived barely. But
a handful of French troops held that.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Because if I did the math, it was 1.5% of the population were actually a security force. That's it, 1.5%. But they survived. But what's so funny is that could have been a book unto itself, but she focused on Peking, the real focal point. And then when that story's over with, then she's like, oh, by the way, this was happening as well, happening simultaneously, and it's probably more ruthless. But I just love how she put that in there. And as a side note, but she tells a story. It's a fascinating story, but she never loses focus of what the essential thing was: Peking, the capital, and the larger, capital of China.
Yeah, I think her writing's very good on this. Like I said, it's a very broad topic. There are a lot of rabbit trails a person could wander off onto, and she does keep it pretty much focused on Peking. Like I said, and I like the way she kind of lays it out, really kind of day by day as it's happening. So there's no backtracking chronologically in the writing. So no, I thought she did a great job with it. I've read some other books in the box for Rebellion, and hers has been my favorite so far. I think it's as far as really being able to get under, because I get confused reading about some of this, particularly if you do it topic by topic or scene by scene, and then you go, this happens from a certain date, and then you have to backtrack into another one. I like the way she really lays out kind of parallel, the timeline approach, you could say, the parallel stories that are taking place at this time.
It's funny, at the end of the book, for the audience, she poses some questions, or at least some topics which people still debate. For one thing, is all these diplomats in the quarter had their intel. You got to realize they had intelligence throughout the country of the Boxers, of them slowly coming up and rising and massacring people. All these little, it's like little pinpricks on the map. Boom, boom, boom here. Right. So if
this actually happened for a few years before that. A lot of the missionaries in China are sending word into the diplomats, hey, you've got a problem going out here. Now, again, the diplomats weren't too worked up about this because the violence was being was focused on missionaries and focused on Chinese Christians. So in their minds, it's like, yeah, if these people are going out there and doing all this, that's kind of their problem. They're causing trouble. It's not really kind of typical bureaucrats. It's not till suddenly their lives are on the stake. Like, oh, this is really pretty serious. We got to get everybody in here to stop it.
Yeah, it's fascinating because she talks about, was this really an intelligence failure? Well, no. They had the intelligence. It was the fact that they didn't know what, like you said, it was happening to missionaries. And by the way, that stuff happened all the time to missionaries. It's just, I think it started to accrue in numbers. The quantity of the incidents just got bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So I'm reading this about, these foreigners in a foreign land are they're being besieged by a population that doesn't want them there, that they're not happy. And I'm laughing because I was like, what year was this printed? Do you know what year this thing came out? 2000.
Yeah, 2000.
Right before 9/11, before the fiasco in Iraq. I was like, oh Lord. I'm reading this like they never realized that this Boxer movement, no one ever imagined it. Well, I mean, you have a culture which is highly superstitious. There be a lot of being unemployed with all the new advancements, and you have an empress who wants to be in control. And you mentioned earlier channeling the energy. You can't control that energy. You got to channel it. It's going somewhere, and she directed it. So I was just like, wow. Talk about timing of a story about foreign nations in a foreign land and the response to them. It's like, wow.
Yeah, no, in fact, I think another interesting aspect to that is the takeaway from the Boxer Rebellion Preston gets into was about a lot of the Western think tanks. Their notion is that the old concept of warfare is changing. Police actions are the future. International military coalitions involved in police actions. That's the future for the 20th century. And I thought that was an interesting takeaway by the people in 1900 or 1901 when they come up with this, and how then you see warfare over the next 100 years, 100 plus years after that. We might rethink the whole notion of international coalitions and police actions. Yeah,
year 1900. This is in the progressive era, right? We're in the progressive era, United States.
All right, yeah.
And so it's funny because Mark Twain has some not so kind words about the Boxer Rebellion. And like he called this the first, it's like the first stage of imperialism, of American imperialism. That's how he quoted it. But it's so funny to see 100 years later, the United States no longer peers, but we're the super world power. And I just got a real kick because I got a kick out of that, and the fact that a lot of the characters we were reading about, most of them die before World War II happens. So it's like, what a different period of time. I mean, you and I read a lot about World War II. These guys are pre-World War II, and it was amazing. You there?
Yeah, absolutely. The notion of, well, I mean, they're, like I said, it's at the height of the progressive era. And of course, I think you'd argue we're probably maybe on the tail end of the progressive era. A lot of those notions still exist, but the whole idea of through elitist leadership that you can manipulate and advance society. These people very much, the leaders at this time, many of them very much have this notion. And they look at the coalition, the military response as a validation of those beliefs. Their success is a validation of those beliefs, of that approach. I think you'd argue maybe they misinterpreted that a bit. Like I said, I see their success lies behind such a focused common agenda in survival.
Yeah.
And secondary to that, then I think you get that competitive edge again of the different agendas, but still focused towards a common goal, and that is to defeat the Boxers and the Imperial Chinese. I see that more as a strength than an internationalism or progressive agenda and all that,
Oh yeah. That's what I gotta tell you, the book is great because this is a book, even though it's about an international scene, it's not about politics. It's a coalition, it's people coming together. There's so many lessons in this. I mean, you could take you and I discussed it was great, but the fact is, I didn't know anything about the boxers. I didn't realize how brutal it was. Oh my God! Again, the things the boxers were doing to especially the Chinese Christian converts. Oh, it's awful. So brutal time in history, but man, what a story of these nations who, like the Russians and the Brits, do not like one another, but man, they support one another and they come up and they survive. So great story of survival. I don't know. You got any final thoughts on the Boxer Rebellion or this book?
No, like I said, I thought it was really well written because there's so many moving parts to this story. The organization of it, I think it's good. It's a longer book. I forget the number of pages, but I want to say it was about 300 plus pages.
Yeah, it's 300, basically 350.
So yeah, it's not a huge book, but it's packed full of a lot of information, I think laid out very concisely. I think anybody, whether you're if you just have an interest in military or political history, it's interesting. But I think it's a real lesson in the value of culture, the value in beliefs, it's the value in how you think, how you approach problems. Where one side we would describe modern in the sense of being very logical, objective. They're looking at facts and attack things scientifically in kind of an organized way, where another side puts an emphasis on tradition, puts an emphasis on individual agendas as far as the Empress Dowager. They're how do I control my fiefdom? And then you talk about a population like with the boxers. It's just it's almost too simple of an agenda to just kill and drive out foreigners. And when you, I think, have a belief that somehow if they just practiced this belief, if they practiced their martial art, they'd be invincible. I think you could see the harm of building up false expectations or motivating your people through lies, through something that's not true.
Yeah.
Because then when that doesn't come through, once it starts to disintegrate, it really disintegrates. As soon as it gets tough for them, it falls apart because, well, the lie is exposed. And
Totally.
yeah, the boxers disintegrate. The Imperial troops decide it's not worth losing their life, their career over. The Empress Dowager didn't think it was worth losing her life over. So she's not quite. They're not the Chinese bureaucracy is not nearly as dedicated to this cause as the boxers are. A lot of these boxers are willing to fight and die for it, but then when they realize kind of the lie of what they've been taught, for a while they're able to get the boxers motivated by telling them anyone who did die just obviously wasn't a true believer. Oh. But as the Allies gain momentum in military victory after military victory going towards Peking, it puts evidence to the lie. So then that falls apart. So again, just to get back to what your people believe, how they believe it, how they think, having protocols, systems of organization, not that any need to be applied rigidly. You don't want bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, but when things do get out of control, when things do seem chaotic, there's a real value there to having systems in place, a very focused, common sense of mission. That's really what I think saves the day for the Allies here.
Totally. The step 2 in gaining strength in chaos, or stage 2, I called forward integration. And that's the combination of 3 things: strategy, basically your direction, where are we going? But organization, which like structure, having the right people in the right roles, and systems, how to operate. And you're absolutely right. They keep those systems running. They're not arbitrary. They're not simplistic, but they're not arbitrary. They serve a purpose. They keep people busy, and it keeps people grinding the way to mission accomplishment. Even though, again, under really dire times, but they survive. They really do. And all the forces around them, those Chinese, the army, you mentioned earlier, there's disunity in the ranks. They don't know. They don't have clarity of mission. Again, if you were to ask them, are you fighting? Is this a war? What are you doing? You'll have different explanations. And that's a sign right there that you don't have unity. So fascinating story. Really well done in the human element. You just see how people react and what they do and how they respond to this. Just fascinating. So
yes, yeah.
I got to read more of her work, because you're right. This is masterly done. I mean, to make a narrative like this and to keep you interested and keep going and going. Wow.
It reads like a story. It really
does.
It reads like a story.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you for participating in this. We're going to have to do another book. I don't know what this is a lot of fun. I thank you for introducing this to me, because I got it and I started reading it. I couldn't, chapter 1. I'm like, oh my Lord. I keep going. So thank you for introducing it to me.
You're welcome. No,
hey, and where can people find you?
They can find me at tsransdell.com. You can find my books on Amazon. The Last Marine, book 1, book 2, book 3, same title, just distinguished by book 1, book 2, book 3. It's a trilogy. So The Last Marine. There's a series called The Last Marines, plural. I am the last Marine.
The Last Marine.
Yeah, The Last Marine.
Gotcha. All right. Well, with that, audience, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Have a good day.
If you like this content and want to hear other things like it, head on over to the website at blackmarketleadership.com. That's blackmarketleadership.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, and you can even create a free members profile